Good afternoon, I'm Dennis Vitorian, and this is the 25th hour. In this week's news for the week of October 18th, Election Day is a little more than 2 weeks away. In New York City, lockdowns start to ease up in hotspots, de Blasio says sorry to the Orthodox Jewish community, and more candidates enter the mayor's race. Cuomo gets graded on his handling of the pandemic in New York, doesn't exactly say sorry to the Orthodox Jewish community, and keeps going on his book tour. Trump and Biden had their third and final debate ahead of Election Day, Obama goes on the campaign trail, and Trump feels the squeeze of his cash-strapped campaign that he's running behind from Biden. The news may have changed by the time you heard this. Starting with Mayor de Blasio and his administration. October 24th marked the first day of early voting in New York City and in the state. If you haven't mailed in your ballot and plan to vote in person, consider voting early. To look up your early polling place, go to findmypollsite.vote.nyc. Mayor de Blasio announced this week that a team of observers are being deployed to polling places in low-income and immigrant communities to thwart voter intimidation. Regarding schools, in two of the city's most diverse and segregated districts, the whitest and wealthiest schools are welcoming more in-person students than low-income schools with students of color. More than 80,000 free childcare slots promised to working parents with hybrid schooling students still haven't appeared. Randomized COVID testing in public schools finds few cases so far, with only 28 positives out of almost 16,400 staff and students. According to the Daily News, 4 city shelters are dead zones for remote students, leaving homeless students trying to find out where to get their internet from in order to attend classes. The city has yet to release attendance records, making it difficult to know whether students are being present at their remote learning sessions consistently. A Spectrum Ipsos poll found that 61% of city residents believe that Cuomo and the state should take back control of the city schools from de Blasio. More than 100 public schools are set to reopen Monday after high COVID rates subsided a bit. As part of the city's randomized testing process, the Somos network of healthcare providers agreed to provide testing for 300 schools in Upper Manhattan and largely immigrant communities. Regarding Corona, de Blasio said shutdowns are likely to remain in place in some hotspots in Brooklyn and Queens beyond this week. Central Queens is going to see some loosening of the rules as they're doing better. The mayor also expressed regret for his handling of outbreaks in Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods. De Blasio put other city agencies on notice not to discriminately enforce COVID regulations against the Orthodox Jewish community.
They need to know that we as the city government understand their suffering, understand the difficulties the community's gone through, understand the fears that people have, rightfully, of discrimination, and that we need to hear each other more and understand each other more. I certainly got very frustrated at times when I saw large groups of people still out without masks, but I think more dialogue would have been better. So I certainly want to express my regret that I didn't figure out how to do that better.
According to new research from the NYU Grossman School of Medicine, NYC residents are dying at a lower rate from COVID this time around than in the beginning, with mortality rates dropping 7.6% in August from 25.6% in March, with doctors unable to point to one predominant factor as to why. However, hospitalizations keep rising, with over 1,000 New Yorkers in the hospital for the first time in 4 months. The city's unemployment rate dropped slightly in September by 2 percentage points to 14.1% according to the New York Department of Labor. The city plans to bring back 25% of its workers to offices by the end of the year. 1 in 7 New York City residents are still unemployed 6 months into the pandemic. There was confusion in Greenpoint this week as the real estate developers that now own the parcel of land where New York City ferry stop exists refused to continue the city's ferry destination, and the city had to abruptly shut down the location. The city said they hoped to restore service by Tuesday, but service was brought back ahead of schedule this week. This week marked the 8th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. Looking to prevent the next hurricane-led catastrophe, the Queens Daily Eagle filed a report on how the Department of City Planning's new rezoning plan focuses on shoring up low-lying areas of Queens. The Huffington Post, however, criticized the city's mishmash of policies that are meant to adapt to storm damage, not prevent it. Some city officials have been moved around this week. Melanie Hartzog is becoming the city's new Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, moving away from being Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and Jacques Jiha will succeed her, moving away from being Finance Commissioner. The city's first Chief Democracy Officer also quietly resigned, Irene Fonseca Sabune, and the mayor has yet to announce a replacement. A commission put together by de Blasio to study police reform are excluding Black Lives Matter's leaders, spurring heads of regional BLM groups to call the entire effort a farce. In Staten Island, a man who took a plea deal for drug charges in 2018 moved to vacate his conviction after body cam footage revealed police officers planting marijuana in the man's car. The Staten Island DA, Michael McMahon, refuses to move forward and join the man's motion, according to The Gothamist. The NYPD announced that there will be 900 new recruits for the November class of the police academy, short of the 1,800 from last year. The city delayed de Blasio's plan for opening new jails in each borough except Staten Island in order to close Rikers Island, but Manhattan's jail is actually still on course to open despite a judge's order forbidding construction or demolition on the site because of a lawsuit initiated by Chinatown residents. The other boroughs' jails are set to be completed by 2027, a year later. A report by the New York Focus took a look at how detainees that leave Rikers Island are told by officials that their IDs were lost by the state, robbing them from the opportunity to rent apartments or get jobs and even end up back in jail. A commission that de Blasio put together to provide him recommendations on how to end solitary confinement will also issue their findings in a matter of days. More candidates are piling into the mayoral race for next year. Zach Iskol was a doctor working at the Javits Center in the middle of the pandemic here in the city, and he threw his hat into the ring this week. City Councilman Carlos Menchaca confirmed to City and State that he was running for mayor a day before he officially announced his candidacy this week. Manhattan federal judge Paul Engelmayer ruled that the city's lack of traffic signals for blind Americans violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. The mayor's Vision Zero initiative, seeking to lower pedestrian fatalities to zero, hasn't lived up to its promise recently, as this year is seeing its highest number of road fatalities in a single year since de Blasio was elected. On Wednesday, about 50 people marched from Long Island City to Astoria, demanding that NYCHA restore cooking gas missing from an entire building in the Astoria houses in Queens. The building in question has been without gas for a month, and according to QNS, it'll be another 2.5 months to get the gas restored. NYCHA came out with a statement this week also clarifying that instead of 3,000 apartments with children containing lead paint, it's actually 9,000. De Blasio said that he would restore half of the cuts he made to his housing department budget to soften the pandemic's blow. According to the publication The City, it turns out that much of New York City's personal income tax is already paid by those who are well off. Data from a report released this week from the Independent Budget Office show that 42.5% of all of the city's income tax was paid by those making at least $1 million a year. A raise in taxes on the wealthy is a popular solution to the city and state's current pandemic-related budget shortfall. Moving on to the City Council, the New York Times reported about how New York City Republicans used to cater to moderates as a result of being in a liberal city, but have veered completely rightward ever since the election of President Trump. An initiative called 21 and 21, meant to increase female representation in the City Council, endorsed 32 female candidates in next year's election. Currently, 12 out of the 50 council members are female. Those that didn't receive the group's endorsement called on the group to be more transparent about its process choosing candidates. A Giuliani-era program that sells debts from city properties to investors might be on the chopping block, according to the publication The City. Council members Antonio Reynoso and Adrian Adams are considering getting rid of the program because the rewards don't match the sacrifices of landowners who have their debt sold. Moving on to Governor Cuomo. Enforcement on a single-use plastic bag ban began Monday after a 6-month delay. Customers have to bring their own bag or pay a 5-cent fee for a paper bag, with fines for retailers that distribute single-use plastic bags. A wedding that was expected to draw 10,000 Orthodox Jewish guests to Williamsburg was scaled down for close family members only, but hundreds were seen still walking in and out of the building, with many without masks inside Cuomo's virus crackdown. Cuomo's virus crackdown also angered Catholics, who say they're being singled out with regulations that prevent more than 10 people in a house of worship if they're in the hot zone. Continuous legal challenges to Cuomo's regulations are being consistently shut down. The Governors Association demanded answers from Trump on a vaccine rollout. Cuomo leads the Governors Association this time around, constantly battling with the president on how exactly the vaccine will be doled out to states. Cuomo said New York is planning mass vaccination sites once a vaccine becomes available through the federal government and had been vetted by an independent state panel. Protesters demanded Cuomo apologize over COVID deaths in nursing homes, filling a coffin with covers of his new book. A report released by the state public health and health planning committees concluded that Cuomo's early response to the pandemic was focused on hospitals, while ignoring input from other public health officials and medical providers, including nursing homes. Meanwhile, Cuomo said that President Trump is to blame for every COVID death in the state. Cuomo's quarantine list, that includes a list of states that someone has to quarantine 2 weeks for if they come from there, exclude Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, with critics calling out the exclusion of those states because of a spike in cases there. Cuomo responded to those critics, saying that it wouldn't be practical to enforce a quarantine rule for those 3 states. According to a poll by Spectrum Network/Ipsos, 67% believe Cuomo is doing a good job handling the pandemic, with 73% saying he is doing better than de Blasio. One of the risks with trying to coalesce all of the authority onto yourself is that you constantly get berated by every side, including parents and principals from New York City who are in the dark about whether they're reopening following being included in yellow and red zones. However, Cuomo soon announced that some lockdowns would be reduced, allowing the reopening of schools in certain zones testing below 3% infection, but then predicted there would be more lockdowns and more infections due to microclusters such as colleges and schools. Nonprofits are calling on Cuomo to release $2 billion in untapped CARES Act funding that the state still hasn't released. While de Blasio apologized to the Orthodox Jewish community, Cuomo was asked about whether he would do the same. He apologized to the Jewish community for having to experience stringent regulations, but doesn't see anything else to apologize to the Jewish community about personally.
I am sorry that they feel the disruption. Well, let me state it more clearly. I'm sorry that they are disrupted. Their religious ceremonies are disrupted. How many people they can have in a synagogue is disrupted. How many people they can have at a wedding is disrupted. The operation of their schools is disrupted. I am sorry for that. In the same way, I'm sorry to the Catholic community and to the Muslim community and to all New Yorkers. I'm sorry that we are going through this.
2 state jails are still dealing with coronavirus outbreaks, Elmira Correctional Facility and Greene Correctional Facility, after a sharp rise in cases in October. More than 80 inmates are infected, with about 200 quarantined. Cuomo also announced that movie theaters can soon reopen with only 50 people allowed inside statewide, except for New York City, because New York City can't have nice things. Local governments are projecting $59 billion in revenue shortfalls through 2022 because of the pandemic. At one of his book events, Cuomo floated the idea of legalizing marijuana in order to raise government revenue. Any state legislator will tell you that all of their efforts to legalize state marijuana have been hampered by Governor Cuomo, who has asked for a very detailed regulatory skeleton for how that would look. The MTA is offloading 2 satellite offices and relocating operations to its Lower Manhattan headquarters, a byproduct of the budget cuts that have been put into effect due to the pandemic. An NYU study found that almost 25% of the city's transit workers had coronavirus, with some saying that they got it at work. Amtrak said that steep cuts would have to come into effect against its workers and work improvements if it doesn't receive almost $3 billion in bailout money from the federal government by December. Evictions have been filed in Rochester after orders put in place delaying evictions expired. Cuomo signed the Safe Harbor Act, which allowed tenants to cite financial hardship as a reason to prohibit evictions, but doesn't forbid landlords from filing eviction proceedings in court. Shortly after the news broke, Cuomo extended the moratorium through January 1st. The Suffolk County Police Department in Long Island put Black and Hispanic drivers through tougher traffic enforcement than white drivers over the past 2 years, including stops and searches. Nassau County's Executive Laura Kern and Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder promised to release data tracking race and ethnicity of drivers stopped and searched by police for the past 2 years following this report. The Working Families Party, a third party representing progressive and labor interests since the late 90s, has poured $800,000 into a campaign for its life. As we've covered before, new rules that were passed make it harder for third parties to stay on the ballot, with at least 2% of the total vote having to go to the party's presidential candidate. Let's move on to Albany. Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who is chair of the Assembly Judiciary Committee, is continuing his crusade against changes made to the state's judicial system as a result of budget cuts. The state courts are cutting 46 Supreme Court justices, including judges with the most experience. The former chief of staff of Assemblyman Felix Ortiz avoided jail time after he pleaded guilty to wire fraud for stealing $80,000 from Ortiz's campaign account. U.S. District Judge Ann Donnelly ordered Maruf Alam to pay $70,000 and complete 200 hours of community service. City and State has a rundown on state Senate elections next year, marking 33 safe Democratic seats, 11 safe Republican seats, 5 likely Democratic, 6 lean Democratic, 3 lean Republicans, 3 likely Republicans, and 2 toss-up races. If there are a total of 63 seats in the state Senate and 150 assembly seats. The state legislature passed a bill that would prevent immigration-related civil arrests inside New York courts, but Cuomo has yet to sign the package, causing anxiety in those fearful of ICE raids. According to the Wall Street Journal, $14 million has been poured into state legislature races between July 1st and this week, more than $9 million for the same time period last year. And state legislators are calling for an end to a stamp requirement for absentee ballots, saying it amounts to a poll tax and pointing at the fact that the requirement wasn't necessary for the primary election, but is for the general. Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal and Jeff Dinowitz are 2 of the lawmakers quoted in the recent State of Politics article about the issue. Moving on to the state courts, the report commissioned by Chief Judge Janet DeFiore and conducted by former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson has revealed more information about the pervasive racial bias in the New York State court system, with racist posts on social media by New York court officers, including Obama in a noose. Black and Hispanic lawyers interviewed in the report said they were often mistaken for criminal defendants and were asked to show ID to enter the courthouse, while most white lawyers weren't. They also said they were believed less often by judges. The bench is also lacking in diversity, with only a quarter of criminal court judges being people of color in New York City. The report recommends that court employees report bias incidents more to the state's Inspector General and expanding bias training for judges and other personnel. Manhattan Supreme Court Judge Deborah James granted a temporary injunction for shelter residents, blocking their relocation from the Upper West Side Lucerne Hotel to the Wall Street Radisson Hotel. The judge said the move couldn't happen without an additional hearing, as it would materially affect and compromise the homeless petitioners' rights. The injunction puts the mayor's plan in limbo. The Department of Justice made the argument in Manhattan Supreme Court this week that Trump can't be sued for denying a rape accusation because his statement was an official presidential act. E. Jean Carroll is claiming that Trump raped her in a department store dressing room 20 years ago, and when Trump publicly denied the claims and said Carroll was lying, Carroll promptly sued him for defamation. The DOJ then asked the court to intervene in the case and move it to federal court, where Carroll's claims would certainly be dismissed because the president can't be sued for defamation for something he did while in his official capacity, which included him calling Carroll a liar, apparently. A federal court will entertain a hearing about whether to remove the case to federal court later this month. Democratic congressional candidate Nate McMurray sued his former employer, Delaware North Coves, alleging that the company pressured him not to run against Republican Representative Chris Jacobs, who McMurray ended up losing to. McMurray and Jacobs both ran for former Rep. Chris Collins' seat, who had to resign because of insider trading charges. New York City parents filed a class action suit against the city to force the reopening of all of its public schools. The lawsuit is being propelled in the media by Staten Island Republican Councilman Joe Borelli. The parents of special needs children are also included in the class action, saying that their children aren't receiving constitutionally guaranteed education. The parents say that they still want others concerned about in-person learning to choose remote learning if they want, but that physical schools must be reopened to guarantee an adequate education and lighten the burden on parents that can't work from home. The First Department's Appellate Division ruled in favor of Paul Manafort, Trump's first campaign manager, in a case about whether the Manhattan DA can go after Manafort on fraud charges, although he's already in jail for those charges in federal prison. Justice Maxwell Wiley said that going after Manafort on the state level would amount to double jeopardy, referring to charging someone twice for the same crime, which is constitutionally prohibited by the 5th and 14th Amendments. Manafort was sent to 7.5 years in jail last March for hiding millions of dollars in offshore accounts and lying about his income. Anna Sanders, a former City Hall reporter, filed a wrongful termination case in New York State Supreme Court this week, alleging that she was fired from the Daily News after pointing out a pay discrepancy of $2,000 between her and a male colleague. Legal Aid sued New York City this week in Manhattan Supreme Court, saying that the city's policy to group homeless males in the same room puts them in danger amongst the pandemic, and that they should instead be in single-occupancy hotels. The Department of Homeless Services reports that it placed 13,000 out of 18,000 adults into hotels. Moving on to President Trump. The New York Post ended up publishing the Hunter Biden report amid newsroom doubts, while Fox News passed on the story. You may recall that the New York Post filed a news story allegedly about a laptop that apparently Hunter Biden left in a laptop repair shop in a different state from where he lives. The owner of the repair shop apparently copied the hard drive of this laptop and handed it to the FBI since last December. The sourcing of the story is incredibly rocky, especially according to other journalists that have tried to poke holes in the story to make sure it holds up to scrutiny. Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, two conservative outlets, have decided not to run with the story, although they do point out Hunter Biden's ethical misgivings in his involvement on the boards of Ukrainian and Chinese companies. Trump's campaign was already bashing the moderator ahead of the third debate ahead of time, Kristen Welker, as terrible and unfair. The debate commission decided on Monday that Trump and Biden would have their mics cut off in the third presidential debate, leaving either candidate to have 2 uninterrupted minutes for their remarks. There wasn't a mute button, but interruptions counted against the candidate's time. The third debate ended up largely going off completely unlike the first one, without the need for mics to be cut off at all, as both candidates didn't interrupt the other during their 2-minute answers. There were very minimal interruptions from both candidates, allowing the candidates to talk about substantive policy, or as much as they could without nonsensically attacking each other. Here are some highlights from the debate.
You talked about taking a therapeutic. I assume you're referencing Regeneron. You also said a vaccine will be coming within weeks.
Yes.
Is that a guarantee?
No, it's not a guarantee, but it will be by the end of the year. But I think it has a good chance.
What steps would you take to give Americans confidence in a vaccine if it were approved?
Make sure it's totally transparent. Have the scientists of the world see it, know it, look at it, go through all the processes. And by the way, This is the same fellow who told you this is going to end by Easter last time. This is the same fellow who told you that, don't worry, we're going to end this by the summer. We're about to go into a dark winter. And he has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year. The point is this, folks. We are in a situation where we have foreign countries trying to interfere in the outcome of our election. His own national security advisor told him that what is happening with his buddy, I will. His buddy, Rudy Giuliani, he's being used as a Russian pawn. He's being fed information that is Russian, that is not true. And then what happens? Nothing happens. And then you find out that everything that's going on here about Russia is wanting to make sure that I do not get elected the next president of the United States because they know I know them and they know me. I don't understand why this president is unwilling to take on Putin.
We have 180 million people out there that have great private health care, far more than we're talking about with Obamacare. Joe Biden is going to terminate all of those policies. These are people that love their health care, people that have been successful, middle-income people, been successful. They have 180 million plans, 180 million people, families, under what he wants to do, which will basically be socialized medicine. He won't even have a choice. They want to terminate 180 million plans.
Your health care plan calls for building on Obamacare. So my question is, what is your plan if the law is ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option. It'll become Biden-care. The public option is an option that says that if you, in fact, do not have the wherewithal if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, providing competition for insurance companies. That's what's going to happen.
As far as my relationships with all people, I think I have great relationships with all people. I am the least racist person in this room.
Well, what do you say to Americans who are concerned by that rhetoric?
I don't know. I don't know
videos?
what to say. I got criminal justice reform done and prison reform and opportunity zones. I took care of black colleges and universities. I don't know what to say. They can say anything. They can say anything. It makes me sad because I am the least racist person. I can't even see the audience because it's so dark. But I don't care who's in the audience. I'm the least racist person in this room.
He pours fuel on every single racist fire, every single one.
After the New York Post broke a skeptically sourced story on Hunter Biden allegedly getting a meeting for one of his Burisma board members with Joe Biden, Trump demanded his Attorney General Bill Barr investigate Hunter Biden. Trump has habitually treated the DOJ as a personal legal service to go after his enemies and save his allies. Voter intimidation is a huge concern during this election, especially because Trump called for his supporters to watch polling places. Democratic voters suddenly got emails in their inboxes, apparently from the right-wing nationalist group Proud Boys, threatening them to vote for Trump or else they'd get hurt. It was later revealed at a press conference by Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe and FBI Director Christopher Wray, among other national security leaders, that Iran and Russia gained information on voter profiles in Florida and Alaska and sent the emails in an attempt to interfere in the elections.
We have identified that 2 foreign actors, Iran and Russia, have taken specific actions to influence public opinion relating to our elections.
Officials say Iran has already used the information to contact voters, sending spoofed emails aimed at damaging President Trump, intimidating voters, and inciting unrest. Overnight, ABC News learning that both countries obtained the information through state and local election data systems.
This data can be used by foreign actors to attempt to communicate false information to registered voters that they hope will cause confusion. If you receive an intimidating or manipulative email in your inbox, don't be alarmed and do not spread it.
Ratcliffe said the warning is not a partisan issue, but some Democrats question the details and the timing. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy tweeting, the emails told voters to support Trump, but the Director of National Intelligence is sure the intent was to hurt Trump. That's a dubious claim.
The U.S. sanctioned 5 Iranian groups, including the Revolutionary Guard Corps, although no sanctions were placed on Russia, despite the U.S. intelligence community saying Russia is the bigger threat. Nevertheless, Trump is trailing Biden badly in most polls, and is trailing or tied with Biden generally in battleground states, and is losing the money battle, with reporting this week indicating that Trump's campaign has $63 million versus Biden's $177 million. Former President Barack Obama finally made his debut on the campaign trail for Joe Biden on Wednesday, delivering a stinging rebuke of President Trump.
We know that he continues to do business with China because he's got a secret Chinese bank account. How is that possible? How is that possible? A secret Chinese bank account. Listen, can you imagine if I had a secret Chinese bank account when I was running for re-election? You think Fox News might have been a little concerned about that? They would have called me Beijing Barry. I've sat in the Oval Office with both of the men who are running for president, and they are very different people. I explained that I never thought Donald Trump would embrace my vision or continue my policies, but I did hope, for the sake of the country, that he might show some interest in taking the job seriously. But it hasn't happened. He hasn't shown any interest in doing the work or helping anybody but himself and his friends, or treating the presidency like a reality show that he can use to get attention. And by the way, even then his TV ratings are down. So you know that upsets him. You know, Republicans love to say right before an election that they'll protect your pre-existing conditions. Now, Joe and I actually protected your policies to make sure people with pre-existing conditions could get health insurance and have coverage. We did it through something called the Affordable Care Act, AKA Obamacare. And Republicans tried to repeal or undermine it more than 60 times. And when they've been asked about it, they keep on promising, we're going to have a great replacement. They said, it's coming. It's been coming in 2 weeks for the last 10 years. Where is it? Where is this great plan to replace Obamacare? They've had 10 years to do it. There is no plan. They've never had one.
Biden returned to the question of court packing in a 60-minute interview, saying that he would put together a commission to study the question of how to reform the Supreme Court because it's, quote, out of whack.
If elected, what I will do is I'll put together a national commission bipartisan commission of scholars, constitutional scholars, Democrats, Republicans, liberal, conservative, and I will ask them to, over 180 days, come back to me with recommendations as to how to reform the court system because it's getting out of whack. The way in which it's being handled. And it's not about court packing. There's a number of other things that our constitutional scholars have debated, and I'd look to see what recommendations that commission might make.
So you're telling us you're going to study this issue about whether to pack the court?
No, whether there's a number of alternatives that go well beyond packing.
This is a live ball.
Oh, it is a live ball. No, it is a live ball. We're going to have to do that. And you're going to find there's a lot of conservative constitutional scholars who are saying it as well. The last thing we need to do is turn the Supreme Court into just a political football. Whoever has the most votes gets whatever they want. Presidents come and go. Supreme Court justices stay for generations.
Trump never completed his 60-minute interview, saying that interviewer Leslie Stahl was questioning him harshly and unfairly.
The biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign.
Well, there's no
Leslie.
real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Can I say something? You know, this is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, they spied on my campaign.
Well, we can't verify
It's been totally
that.
verified.
No.
It's been, just go down and get the papers. They spied on my campaign, they got caught.
No.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught. And you will see that, Leslie, and you know that, but you just don't want to put it on the air.
As a matter of fact, I don't know that.
Okay.
And you're out
so
there.
So why don't you get back to your interview and let's go.
Okay.
CBS News has released its own statement saying, quote, the White House's unprecedented decision to disregard its agreement with CBS News and release their own footage will not deter 60 Minutes from providing its full, fair, and contextual reporting, which presidents have participated in for decades.
Twitter ended up deleting Trump's science advisor's tweet that said masks don't work. Trump's public health officials routinely push fringe theories on how coronavirus can be stifled, including herd immunity. Dr. Fauci said he was absolutely not surprised Trump contracted COVID, and in a call with campaign staff on Monday, Trump called Fauci and his other health experts as idiots, complained about what would happen if he fired Fauci, and claimed people were telling him they're tired of COVID and saying, whatever, leave us alone.
People are tired of hearing Fauci and all these idiots, these people that have gotten it wrong. Fauci's a nice guy. He's been here for 500 years. He called every one of them wrong. And he's like this wonderful guy, a wonderful sage telling us out. He said, do not wear face masks. That's a number of months ago. He said, do not close it up to China. I have a list of 15 things, this guy. And yet, we keep him. Every time he goes on television, there's always a bomb. But there's a bigger bomb if you fire him. But Fauci's a disaster. I mean, this guy's, if I listen to him, we have 500,000 deaths. And let me tell you one other thing. We saved 2.2 million people. If we didn't do what we did and close it and do it just right now, we're opening it. But we'd never close it again. It would never close. It'll never close again. Because we know the disease. But Fauci, if we listen to him, we'd have 800,000 deaths right now. So with that, I get along with him. If there's a reporter on, you can have it just the way I said. I couldn't care less.
Reporting from the Washington Post, Rachel Siegel and Jeff Stein revealed that the Treasury Department is sitting on $259 billion of congressional funds that haven't been spent yet, meant for emergency lending programs for businesses and local governments. The CDC issued a guidance that seemingly went without saying, wear a mask on a plane. The airline industry and unions actually sought the guidance, but the recommendation still falls short of what they're asking for. The Labor Department released new unemployment claims numbers this week, showing that the number of claims have dropped to 787,000, down from 842,000 last week, which bodes well for a recovery. The data mining company Palantir agreed to help the U.S. track COVID vaccines and their distribution. The New York Times' Mike McIntyre, Russ Butner, and Suzanne Craig came out with a report detailing how records reveal Trump's business pursuits in China, including the first year he ran for president. The reporting found that Trump maintains a business account in China and has paid more taxes in the communist country than he has in the U.S. Trump's lawyer responded to the piece saying that Trump's account in China hasn't been active for years, despite Trump later saying in the third debate that he ended up closing the account.
The Trump business entity that holds that secret Chinese bank account is called Trump International Hotels Management. That entity, in turn, owns something called THC China Development. It's a Trump company with a Chinese bank account. That company, mysteriously, according to the Times, showed a huge spike in revenue out of the blue in 2017, right after Trump was sworn in as president. The revenue spike was, according to the Times, $17.5 million. That's more revenue that had come into that company in the previous 5 years combined. But Trump became president. All of a sudden, there was this huge new unexplained influx of money into that company with this Chinese bank account. It comes in from who knows where, but it goes out as cash into the president's pocket. After that $17.5 million windfall from nowhere once he became president, President Trump took that out as cash. He took $15.1 million of it out for himself in 2017 once he was president.
Reporting by Political's Roger Sollenberger puts a spotlight on Trump's chief of staff Mark Meadows' Federal Election Commission filings and raised questions on unlawful spending and campaign coordination, using campaign money to buy gourmet cupcakes, pay for his cell phone bill, his groceries, lavish meals, spending thousands at a jeweler, and staying at the Trump Hotel. It's illegal to spend campaign money on personal expenses. Trump signed an executive order this week that will cost tens of thousands of federal employees their civil service protections, chiefly policymakers and policy workers who can now be removed from their job for little cause, losing due process and union guarantees. You may recall that Trump deemed certain cities anarchist jurisdictions because of the way they handled protests against police brutality, with the effect of reducing federal funding for those jurisdictions, which would ironically defund the police. Among the federal programs being cut, Politico's Brianna Eiley and Rachel Rubin reported that millions of dollars of coronavirus relief, HIV treatment, screenings for newborns, among others, would be cut. We mentioned a little later about a lawsuit that was filed by cities that were identified as anarchist jurisdictions. NASA recently achieved an exciting operation. A probe landed itself on an asteroid and successfully retrieved a sample. America's astronaut aboard the International Space System, Chris Cassidy, had also returned this week from outer space. The DOJ unveiled an indictment against 6 alleged Russian government hackers in connection with cyber attacks against Ukraine's power grid, parliament, and finance ministry, France's elections in 2017, worldwide computer damage in 2017, the 2018 South Korean Olympics, and pharmaceutical companies. Diplomats and spies are battling the Trump administration over sonic attacks that led to headaches and confusion, with the attack suspected as coming from Russia, according to reporting from the New York Times' Anna Swanson, Edward Wong, and Julian Barnes. The attacks most famously came up from Cuba, with an unexplained illness striking diplomats and their family members. Ever since, the same symptoms from the Havana syndrome have shown up in China. The State Department produced inconsistent assessments of patients and events, ignored diagnoses, and withheld basic information from Congress, says the Times. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Russia are reportedly nearing the deal to extend the New START treaty that would freeze the increase of nuclear warheads by an extra year. The treaty was signed by Obama and then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. According to Political's Laura Seligman and Brian Bender, time is running out for a deal so close to the election. The U.S. signed an international declaration along with Brazil, Egypt, Hungary, Indonesia, and Uganda, challenging the idea of an international right to abortion. A top White House official went to Syria for hostage talks. Kash Patel, Trump's deputy assistant and top White House counterterrorism official, went to Damascus earlier this year to release 2 Americans, Austin Tice and Maj Kamal Maz, held by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, according to the Wall Street Journal. This marked the first time that a high-level U.S. official met with Syria in more than a decade. Pompeo threatened sanctions after the UN-Iran arms embargo expired. Iran pledged to resume arms deals after the embargo expired. U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad rejected the Taliban's claim that the U.S. violated its peace agreement as unfounded. The Taliban pointed to recent airstrikes that the U.S. said were used to defend Afghan forces. China threatened to detain Americans if Chinese scholars are prosecuted by the DOJ. At least 5 scholars were arrested for failing to disclose military ties on their visa applications. The State Department finally removed Sudan from the list of countries that sponsor terrorism after Sudan promised to seek foreign aid and normalize ties with Israel. In addition, Sudan will pay $300 million to victims of the 1998 U.S. Embassy terrorist attacks in Kenya and Tanzania and the 2000 USS Cole attack. After Trump presided over a signing ceremony in the Oval Office, Trump asked Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu whether someone like Biden could get him a deal like he did, and Netanyahu carefully responded.
Do you think Sleepy Joe could have made this deal, baby? Sleepy Joe. I think, do you think he would have made this deal somehow? I don't think so.
Well, Mr. President, one thing I can tell you is we appreciate the help for peace from anyone in America, and we appreciate what you've done enormously.
Yeah.
A story by the Texas Tribune's Yasmin Khalifa highlights the lack of Arab political representation due to the census not letting people choose Middle Eastern as an identification. The Wall Street Journal's Diane Nissenbaum reported how a secret U.S. rescue in Yemen eventually played a role in the Israel-UAE peace deal. Trump's administration offered to pay for Brazil's purchases of 5G equipment as the country updates its technology. The 2 countries also signed a limited trade agreement this week. Moving on to Congress. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was optimistic about a stimulus deal while Trump called for a bigger number. Pelosi had set Tuesday as a deadline for reaching a deal but blew past it without saying anything among optimistic news of a deal. Reuters' Michelle Conlon and Christopher Walljasper were out with a report detailing how if a deal wasn't reached providing financial support to landlords and tenants, a new wave of evictions and homelessness may begin in January. Experts agree that no deal will be reached before the election. In 2018, $30 million was spent for New York's 19th congressional district, but Representative Antonio Delgado is all but certain to win his seat again. The same goes for Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who despite having heavy favorability ratings still presides over one of the most expensive races in the country. For Democrat Max Rose to win his seat again, he's going to have to go to war with the Democratic Party and its liberal positions, reports Politico's Ali Mutnik. Upstate Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik debated her Democratic challenger Tedra Cobb this week, with the affair seeing both women accusing the other of obfuscating their records and twisting their words. In the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is moving 2 important priorities to the Senate floor next week. Judge Amy Coney Barrett will have her nomination to the Supreme Court to replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Monday. Additionally, the Senate's $500 billion coronavirus relief bill was put to a vote and promptly defeated because it couldn't get the 60 votes necessary to exit debate. The bill aimed to provide a sliver of relief that Democrats passed in May, and the Senate measure had been defeated before. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee boycotted the vote to take Barrett's nomination out of committee on Thursday. After Barrett's confirmation went out of committee despite the boycott, Lindsey Graham approved subpoenas against Twitter and Facebook so they can explain why they limited the New York Post Hunter Biden story. Conservatives are very angry with the social media giants for blocking links to the New York Post story, saying that the sourcing behind the story may legitimately lead to disinformation ahead of the 2020 presidential election. Lindsey Graham, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, is in the fight for his political life against Democrat Jamie Harrison. Harrison's fundraising broke records, and Graham now wants to review the source of small dollar contributions on the Democratic fundraising platform ActBlue. You may recall last week, Senator Perdue mocked Kamala Harris's name. The mocking of Kamala Harris's name ended up yielding nearly $2 million for Perdue's rival ahead of his Senate election race. And Senator Corden, moving on to the judicial branch, D.C. District Judge Beryl Howell blocked Trump's effort to end food stamps for 700,000 unemployed people, siding with 19 states, D.C. and New York City, and private parties. Judge Howell called the administration's proposal arbitrary and capricious, a term used when new regulations don't conform to the Administrative Procedure Act, and handed the cities and states summary judgment, meaning there was no dispute in the facts. The Supreme Court agreed to review Trump's border wall funding and asylum policies. Trump diverted military funds for the wall and instituted new policies requiring asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their cases wound through the system. Judge Barrett might be confirmed to the court in time to hear the cases. The Supreme Court denied the Pennsylvania GOP's request to limit mail-in voting. The court was deadlocked 4-4, giving a win to Democrats. The case was about whether mail-in ballots should be counted if they arrived 3 days after Election Day, as long as they were postmarked on November 3rd. States are seeing record numbers of early and mail-in voting. Florida shattered its opening day record for early voting, with at least 350,000 people voting statewide into the night. The High Court also blocked curbside voting in Alabama after a challenge from the state's Republican Secretary of State John Merrill. The plan was for some polling places to offer curbside voting due to fears of being inside due to the pandemic, with the lower court ruling blessing the move. Justices Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan dissented and said curbside voting was a common-sense measure. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 12-3 to deny an emergency stay requested by North Carolina Republicans to stop an election rule that would count mail-in ballots that arrived 9 days after Election Day, so long as they're postmarked by November 3rd. The Department of Justice filed an antitrust suit on Tuesday alleging that Google is a monopoly, stifling competition in search and search advertising. The suit is controversial because it was reportedly rushed by Attorney General Bill Barr, despite prosecutors claiming they didn't have sufficient evidence to file a case earlier. The move is also not supported by any of the Democratic attorneys general. Trump's lawyers returned to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to argue against House of Representatives subpoenas for Trump's tax returns. The Supreme Court had ruled earlier that the president isn't immune from congressional subpoenas, but the subpoenas can't be overbroad, and returned the case to the appellate court to discover more about the purpose of the congressional subpoenas. Lawyers appointed by a California federal judge say they can't find the parents of 545 migrant children separated by the Trump administration. Some parents were deported to Central America without their children, according to the ACLU. Trump instituted a policy as early as 2017 that separated migrant children from their parents in a zero-tolerance policy. A lawsuit was filed in D.C. federal court this week, suing the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia Mohammed bin Salman for ordering the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was assassinated in a Saudi embassy in Turkey 2 years ago. Saudi Arabia had trials of its own against the ones it said allegedly plotted and carried out the killings, but the trials were held in private. Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, the drug that addicted and killed millions, pled guilty to defrauding federal health agencies and violating anti-kickback laws, paying $8.3 billion. The Sackler family, which heads Purdue, will pay $225 million in civil penalties. The company encouraged doctors to prescribe OxyContin even in situations where the patient didn't need it. Purdue is still facing numerous lawsuits across the states, and also doesn't even have enough money to pay the settlement amount, which would force the company to become a publicly held company by the government, meaning that any profits that the company makes will eventually go back to rehab programs. Seattle, Portland, and New York City filed a lawsuit in the Western District in Washington State against the U.S. government for being called anarchist jurisdictions and having their federal programs cut due to the distinction. A small update in the Michael Flynn case. The judge presiding over the original criminal case against Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, had ordered the Department of Justice now verified that no other filings from their office contain fabrications after the Department of Justice admitted to botching up facts in a recent submission of papers. And finally, in national news, vaccine storage issues could leave 3 billion people without access, as rural areas don't have the capacity to freeze vaccines to maintain their effectiveness. The virus surge in Europe helped push the global count for infections past 40 million. The Wall Street Journal's Melanie Evans, Alexandra Berzon, and Daniela Hernandez are out with a story revealing that some California hospitals refused COVID transfers for financial reasons, according to state emails. Meanwhile, AstraZeneca and Oxford University are resuming their vaccine study after a participant in Brazil died. The U.S. reported breaking past more than 81,000 daily cases, breaking previous records from July. More than 41,000 people are hospitalized with coronavirus in the U.S., a 40% rise. 14 states have more people hospitalized for the virus on a day in the past week, according to the New York Times. Explosive new Colorado wildfires prompted 3,000 evacuations. Two of Colorado's largest wildfires in history are happening right now and still going strong as firefighters wrangle to stop the flames. In Alaska, a tsunami warning was issued on Monday after a 7.5 magnitude earthquake hit the state, but thankfully the waves didn't result in any injuries. That's it for this week on the 25th Hour. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your friends. Make sure that our podcast is climbing the charts. Don't forget to become a patron at patreon.com. You can visit us as www.patreon.com/the25thhournews. We also have our own website live now. It's the25thhournews.com. If you have any suggestions or any tips, feel free to email us at the25thhournews@gmail.com. Thank you and have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.